last slides you had was a picture of that cedar waxwing kind of nested inside your sea buckthorn tree there. And it reminded me of something that I've tried to articulate several times, and you put it an interesting way, which is like, what's like the primary and the tertiary yield here? Is like, is the primary yield the berries or is it the birds? And so I just wanted to kind of throw an idea out there and get your thoughts on it. But one of my hypothesis about at least my own, and it sounds like yours, like the deep satisfaction that you get when you see a wild animal like just thriving, or when you see like a new calf being born, or like just like, or like a really healthy tree or something like that. Like it's I call it like vicarious well-being is kind of being transmitted. And what my hypothesis is that we must have some kind of an instinct or an intuition that we really are all connected, and that when we see biodiversity in a thriving state, it makes us feel just like really, really good and secure. And and I'm sure there's all kinds of evolutionary biological mechanisms that could play into that. Because again, we literally do depend upon these species for things that we're now just starting to quantify, and I don't think we'll ever really be able to understand it all. But yeah, I just kind of want to get your thoughts on that concept of like vicarious well-being, and why it is so satisfying to see wildlife and natural ecosystems thrive.
Yeah, no, I think you said it. I couldn't say it better. I mean, you're seeing a wild species around you doing well, or your own domestic cows or sheep, and looking beautifully, or whatever it may be, thriving. You kind of have that sense of like, oh yeah, we're all good. Like their success is your success. Like them thriving is you thriving, and there's not a line between them. And I think that's where, over the last bunch of years, my focus has become more and more on like the growing wildlife, like enhancing the yields for the local wildlife. Partly I been getting into hunting in the last bunch of years, so that stimulated a little, and read some awesome old Aldo Leopold work about that. But that it started to happen without me realizing it too, because you just start planting a lot of stuff and you can't keep up with it all, and you start feeding all the other members of the system beyond just yourself, and feeling really good about it, like you said, and in some ways feeling at least as good about it as the stuff you're hauling in your basket into your root cellar. And that kind of makes you stop, because it doesn't always hit you consciously, but it is like you feel yourself being this force that's just helping to channel the energy that's at large through you into benefiting the system as a whole, which you're a part of, but you're bringing everyone on board. It's like you're all getting on the boat together to go to a good place, or to float rather than sink. And it's a great feeling, because you're helping everyone along. I'm sure you could draw it's like selfish evolutionary biology parallels about it, or reasons, because it is ultimately self improving.
Yeah.
But it's also sharing in the joy. It's just like doing some awesome activity with your child makes it even better than if you're doing it and having a perfectly good time by yourself. There's something better about sharing it, and it's maybe along those lines.
Yeah. Well, and I think like this is one of the things that we try to emphasize a lot. Like I think two of them are, one you've already mentioned is this idea of like highlighting the appropriateness of context, and like that the answer is like it depends, and getting people away from prescriptions and focusing on principles. And the other one is kind of getting past this notion of, um, you know, permaculture as being about altruism. It's like no, like we are doing this because we need to do it to survive. We're not doing it out of charity. It is out of our own self-interest. And I think it's really telling about how disconnected our society is from, natural ecosystems, that we could even have like this concept of, like an environmental charity or something like that. Like it's so foreign. Like we literally need these things to survive, and if they're not there, we're gone. And it's like you said, when we see something else thriving, I think it feels good, because we intuitively, if not consciously, know that it's a sign that we're also gonna do good.
I think it's really interesting. I've been wanting to kind of rage in the last little while with all the momentum going towards these petri dish meats and plant-based everything, and indoor vertical farms, and it's society is moving as fast as like one part of society is moving as fast away as possible from that idea. And then you've got kind of other people that are represented maybe loosely by Zach Bush that are starting to recognize that we actually still are connected with all of this stuff. So we're at a really interesting crossroads.
Yeah, there's something like supernatural about it, in a literal sense, of like that those views, like you were expressing, Dakota, that we could have like environmental charity or whatever else. It's almost like it comes from a place of that we're not all members of this. There's some outside thing that can give charity. That's not, there's some group or person, or there's even the possibility of non-membership, which is ultimately kind of supernatural, and not supernatural in a true literal way, not a good, nothing like awesome about that.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me that
extracted.
I can never remember where I heard this from, but there was a kind of a reconciliation group that I was part of for quite a few years, and somebody came in. It was I believe it was an Indigenous elder, and they were talking about how in their language they didn't have a word for gift or charity. It's like that concept that, like you said, that you could be a non-member and just like do something, and that there wouldn't be some kind of reciprocal relationship that was implied within that, and that they get what didn't exist in their language was a really interesting insight for me. And it's not intuitive, because people want it. Like we've been kind of told that this morality of altruism and like self-sacrifice, and like that you could ever do something that was totally separate from yourself. It sounds like a good thing, but it actually leads to these ideas of non-membership and withdrawal, and feeling like you're not part of a natural system. The philosophy behind permaculture, I know it's not as sexy as like the herb spirals and all this other stuff, but I'm glad that we're talking about this, because like in my mind, this is the most important thing that we could be talking about when it comes to building a permaculture property, is the the culture and the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, and it seems like we have to get beyond that, like transactionalism, that everything is transactual, that it's measured and there's specific value, and we're in these transactions with people. And I almost want to say capitalism, but that doesn't embody it. The whole problem, the whole dysfunction of it isn't, we can't just call it capitalism and have that be completely accurate or embodying. But it seems like if there's one good way to get beyond that, it's to like live in an abundant system where you have too much. Like these apples are going to rot. Like I better give them away. because what am I, that'd be a way, that'd be ridiculous. Like there's people who want some of this or whatever else you have total abundance of, and farmers know that and gardeners know that. So it's a good way to kind of get people maybe into that space of moving beyond that transactualism, because you're like, hey, you're living that, to use that Charles Eisenstein like term, like living in the gift, like you feel it's very obvious that you're living by the graces of the universe that's so abundant, and you're in that flow. So what else are you going to do but pass that flow along and bring more people into that flow? But working with natural systems kind of gets you there. Otherwise, it's like you have to struggle to be there. Like maybe you strike it rich on some job, but it's not like you just planted these tiny seeds that weighed a gram, and now you have like 1,000 pounds of like this stuff, this beautiful thing that you only need half of that, to get by. And it was just from sunshine and rain,
Yeah.